Divorce and remarriage is a very troubling topic for a lot of people. In fact, many who are students of the Bible find it difficult to accept what the majority among Christians traditionally teach, which is that the divorced are not eligible for marriage and must remain celibate. Their position is based upon what many people assume that Jesus taught. But most people feel uncomfortable with their position after they read statements from the Apostle Paul, like let them marry, where he clearly refers to the unmarried, 1 Corinthians 7, 8, and 9, and obviously divorced people are unmarried. The traditional teaching that the divorced have no right to a marriage is so hurtful to Christianity that God, in His foresight, included it in the catalog of doctrines of demons. He called it forbidding to marry. The text is 1 Timothy 4, verses 1 through 3. The doctrine noted clearly has Jesus contradicting Moses, Paul contradicting Jesus, and God requiring punishment, a life of celibacy for some who are completely innocent of marital sin. Gill, a noted commentator on Proverbs 17:26, which says also to punish the just is not good, he says it is evil and an abomination to the Lord. And he says evildoers indeed should be punished, but to punish the righteous also as well as them is far from being commendable. Indeed. Jesus could not possibly have taught what is attributed to him by traditional teachers. When you see this, then you are in a position to see the clear teachings of the Apostle Paul as he deals with questions that Christians ask him regarding who may marry, found in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. One of the most basic rules of hermeneutics is that we must not construe a difficult passage in such a way as to contradict other clear passages. Nevertheless, that is obviously what has been done and continues to be done regarding divorce and remarriage. The doctrine that forbids marriage for some who need it to avoid fornication would never have taken root if Bible students over the years had not drawn a conclusion before seeing harmony in all the New Testament teachings on the subject. It is no little matter to misuse Jesus' words in such a way that it causes us to disregard or twist clear Bible teachings. Such disregard for good hermeneutics is reckless and it's dangerous. We must harmonize all biblical teachings on the subject of divorce and remarriage. What if when Jesus said put away, he actually meant what he said, instead of what many have traditionally assumed that he meant? Let's look at the text, Mark 10, verse 11, where Jesus said, "Whosoever shall put away his wife and marry another committeth adultery against her." The Greek word used here, apoluo, is not the word for divorce, although it has certainly been misused by many to mean divorce. It is never translated divorce in many of the older reliable versions. Note that this text contains no exception clause. This means that the interpretation put on parallel passages that do have an exception clause, giving many the idea that second marriages are forbidden unless the divorce was initiated because of adultery, is unfounded. It was and is a common practice of the Jewish men to apoluo, put away a wife and marry another. The law of Moses allowed men to have more than one wife, so marrying another was not the issue that Jesus condemned. The putting away was the real issue, and it needed to be dealt with as a sinful practice. Indeed, Jesus preached that their practice was sinful. But the hearers apparently did not understand him to be talking about the legal divorce process authorized by Moses, found in Deuteronomy 24, because had they done so, they would have finally found cause to kill him. Jesus condemned something much worse than divorce, and that was putting away but not giving the divorce. It was a bad thing because women generally could not divorce a man. But why wouldn't the men give the certificate so the woman that he was putting away could go be another man's wife, as Moses commanded, and Jesus noted in Mark 10:3. Well, when a man put away or sent away a wife, he would avoid having to pay back the dowry, which he would have to do if he, or would not have to do if he actually, or rather would have to do if he actually divorced her. Nevertheless, Jesus condemned the putting away and marrying another because it was adultery against her, as described in Mark 10 and verse 11, which apparently does not mean adultery will be committed in a second marriage. Now in Matthew 5:32, Jesus spoke of the act of putting away and marrying another as something that would result in adultery for the woman and any man that might marry her. But before drawing a conclusion on this text, note that in that same context, verse 17 and 18, Jesus promised that he was not going to change the law on anything. That would be later, after his death. Therefore, his statement must have been in harmony with the current law of God that gave the provision for a divorce, which was really a gift to women compared to just being put away. Now, why would a man who married this put-away woman commit adultery? Well, and this makes too much sense for many to accept, it's because she was not legally divorced, and was therefore still married. The woman that was put away would commit adultery because her ability to remain faithful to her husband was taken away. But in one sense, a man could put away his wife and marry another without doing any wrong, and she could marry another without doing any wrong. This is where the exception clause applies. This would be if the putting away was for fornication. The right thing to do in such cases. And there are Bible examples to support this thinking. Now, it is commonly believed and taught that this fornication noted by Jesus is adultery, a sexual thing. But if he had meant adultery, wouldn't he have said adultery? At any rate, here's what the exception clause was all about. If the marriage was not legal or scriptural, and a man realized such to be the case, maybe he married a cousin or sister, whatever, by accident, all he would need to do was put away or separate from her permanently. A divorce certificate would not be needed because he had never had a legal marriage with the woman. This is evidently the understanding of Jesus' disciples, who said, Matthew 19 and 10, if the case of the man be so with his wife or woman, who he would need to put away, it is not good to marry. This position is the only one that allows Jesus, Moses, and Paul to be in harmony in teaching God's will regarding who has a right to marry. And it allows people who want to live for Jesus to have a marriage, even if a previous marriage has failed. How many people through the ages have been driven away from Christ because some misguided preacher told them that they must break up their marriage and live celibate? Now, Paul's teachings on whether a divorced person may marry is very clear. 1 Corinthians 7:27, art thou bound unto a wife that is married to a woman? Seek not to be loosed or divorced. Art thou loosed or divorced from a wife? Seek not a wife. This would be because of the present distress that he talked about in verse 26. And then verse 28, but and if thou marry, thou hast not sinned. And if a virgin married, she has not sinned. In conclusion, Jesus never contradicted Moses on anything. However, he did take issue with the Jews on various matters, one of which was their dealings with their wives. They asked, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause? Matthew 19 and 3. But Jesus did not deal with justifiable causes for divorce. That question was really irrelevant because the men could have had as many wives as they wanted, and the putting away was suffered by Moses because of hardness of heart. There was no punishment for it, even though it was not God's ideal from the beginning. Verse 8. Jesus wisely dealt with the question that they asked him, and in so doing he did not fall into the trap by taking sides on the controversial issue. Jesus did not make any laws regarding divorce and remarriage. He followed the law of Moses faithfully. He did not teach that a divorced person has no right to a marriage. It would have been contrary to Moses' law, God's nature, the nature of man, and the teachings in the New Testament that would come later. But this gives us no reason to conclude that it's all right for one to divorce his or her spouse. Although divorce ends a marriage and frees the parties to marry another, one should only seek a divorce after it has become apparent that the marriage is not going to work, as God himself did, Jeremiah 3:8. The Apostle Paul teaches men to love their wives, Colossians 3:19, and women to be in subjection to their husbands, Ephesians 5:22. One cannot have hope of heaven while rejecting the teachings of God. I invite you to my website where you will find material that supports the idea that the unmarried has a God-given right to a marriage. It's totalhealth.bz. And God bless you in your study of this important Bible subject. Jesus said, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free.